I would like to quickly ask the audience a few questions. In the last month, how many of you have eaten at least one egg? In the last month, how many of you have eaten at least chicken one time? In the last month, how many of you have had beef at least one time? In the last month, how many of you have had cheese, milk, or yogurt one time? In the last month, how many of you had fish at least one time? Thank you. Okay, so the question I'd like to ask all of you is, these people are enjoying these foods, they taste good. It's terrible for animals, terrible for the environment, but let's forget that for a second. What is
the end of humanity, yes.
What is the benefit? If you're saying, a lot of people are saying, look, so I don't live to 92, I live to 87, I'll take it. I don't live to 94, I live to 88, it's not so bad. So what's the reason? A lot of people aren't after perfect health to live to 105. They're saying, I just want to have a good, healthy life. Like, what is the reason I wouldn't smoke cigarettes is the outcomes seem terrible. But it seems like there's a lot of people in their 70s and 80s, some in their 90s who are not vegan. So why should these people do what they consider extreme when it's socially nice and easy to just have a little fish, a little chicken? Why not moderation? Like, why not like chicken, once a week, fish twice a week, only eat eggs on the weekend? Like, why can't these people, what's the downside? What's the downside to having some animal products?
Well, one downside is premature death and disability. So the consequence of eating an animal-rich diet is that people have much higher risk, particularly for conditions like heart attack and stroke. So they find themselves unable to talk or move, lying in a nursing home bed, waiting for somebody to change their diaper for the last 2 decades of their life. And oftentimes it'll be you that's being asked to change their diaper, so it's probably a good idea to try to encourage them to minimize the use of animal foods.
I'll be a bit the contrarian in this group, and some of you probably expect what I'm going to say. I don't think that the adoption of a vegan diet is necessary. And I think sometimes our promotion of it interferes with people making changes that would be significant, very significant. And so our diet does not call for people to be vegan, although I'm not shy about recommending it to people who I think must do it because they have health issues. And I don't talk anybody out of it. I'm vegan. It's a choice that I made. Okay, I didn't have to do it for personal health. I just decided to do it for a variety of reasons. The reason I think this is so important, and I spoke about this last night, is that we have 2 problems in this community. And one is we've got to get people to do this. And I think the fact that a bunch of you are here tonight to listen to a bunch of plant-based doctors talk about this and you're still eating animal foods is indicative of our problem. And we've got to solve it. We've got to stop thinking it's going to go away on its own or that it's going to solve itself or whatever. Problems don't usually get better, they get worse. And so we have to market this to people. If we can't get people to do it, we're done before we start. And it is true that there's more interest in plant-based eating. But I come from a business background, and one thing I learned in my business background is to differentiate buzz from traction. It's easy to get excited about something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gaining traction in the marketplace. When I worked for a Fortune 500 company, people let me do a lot of things I wanted to do, but sooner or later I had to answer these really tough questions like, what kind of difference is this making? Do we get more customers? Do they stick around longer? Do they spend more money? Do they refer more people? Because you can't just go on pure excitement and hope that everything else will catch up. So here's my point. When we talk about, and we do dinners and we do a lot of outreach, and I have a very popular YouTube channel, and we are very successful in getting people on board to do this. When we go into employer sites where people are openly hostile when we're there, okay, they didn't invite us in, their employer invited us in. And our job is to get people to volunteer to sign up for our programs. The only thing we ask the employer to do is to guarantee us 3 workshops that employees are required to attend. One on chronic degenerative health, mental health, and musculoskeletal health. Then they can decide what they want to do. And we have a 65% voluntary enrollment in our programs. So the first thing is you got to get successful at getting them in. And I'm not talking about namby-pamby, ridiculous crap like moderation. Nobody knows what that means. In fact, a very good study was done 3 years ago that showed that moderation, the definition of it is what I want to eat right now of something I really like, okay? So you have to use very prescriptive communication, which we do. You can have animal foods 2 to 3 times a week, 3 at the outside, organic or wild caught, no dairy. That's very prescriptive. Nobody doesn't understand what that means. And if you sort it out calorie-wise, it's about what the Okinawans are eating, it's about what the Papua New Guineans are eating, and the rural Chinese and the Northern Africans. They're not vegans. Again, for the record, I'm vegan. But I don't think we can justify taking the vegan stance if our goal is to get more people enrolled. You got another problem too, which is compliance. 2 weeks of dietary perfection doesn't lead to health. Decades of dietary excellence leads to health. So I have a client in Columbus, and I can use him as an example, who had a heart attack and had a stent put in, long before he ever came to us. He's been compliant on a plant-based diet, eating animal foods once a week for 4 years, lost 60 pounds, off his cholesterol-lowering meds, off his blood pressure medication. And I'll take my people who eat some animal foods and stick with this for 4 years and put them up against 2 weeks of dietary perfection any day of the week, and my people will win in terms of long-term health. Now again, I am not saying veganism is bad. And Steve is right when he says eating animals is bad for the environment, bad for the animals. It's less bad for the environment and less bad for the animals if we dry up the need for factory farms. And if everybody did what I'm talking about in the United States of America, there would be no demand that would fuel a factory. You couldn't afford to have a factory farm in the United States if everybody dropped back to 2 or 3 servings a week. And we can sell that easier than we can veganism. And I think Steve used the term extremism, and I think that's sometimes how it's perceived. So I'll take the unpopular view, and I don't disagree with the fact that it probably is better if you don't eat any. And I'll tell you some other things that are better. I'm clearly trying to kill myself, and I'll tell you how I'm doing it. I wear acrylic nails. It's probably not good for you. Nobody knows what color my hair is. I don't want to know. Nobody else knows either. I dye it. I'm wearing eye makeup. I have wine probably 8 to 10 times a year.
Oh!
I know. I have had cookies, and I'm glad you're sitting down because somebody's definitely.
I didn't know we had
pass out on
sinners
this one.
up here with us.
Yeah, oh, you have no idea. I've had birthday cake with white flour in it. I know. Clearly trying to kill myself. All right. Well, I'm obviously being facetious, but seriously, people, we have to talk to people in ways that they will listen. And I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll be quiet. So again, coming from a background of business, here's one of the things that I can assure you. If everybody's talking to people and they're not listening, you can't blame it on the people you're talking to. You have to reframe your message. Okay, so when I was a sales trainer, if I taught people to go out to the public with a message that resulted in nobody buying anything, we can't sit around and talk about how stupid everybody is. We got to talk about what is the message that we're giving to people. And you don't have to compromise your principles in order to do this. I don't have to stop being a vegan in order to frame a message that's scientifically correct that gets more people on board. So you don't have to and by the way, if you want to promote a vegan diet because you're a vegan, then just say that. But don't be upset when people say, I don't want to be like you. I didn't start a company called I Want to Be Like Pam. I started a company called Wellness.
You probably
Farm
would
Health.
sell a lot more.
Well,
if you
no. As it turns out, nobody wants to be like Pam. Okay? I mean, people would like to have my energy and all that kind of stuff, but I'm a little bit goofy, you know, and so nobody wants to be like me. So I started a company called Wellness Farm Health, and we try to really promote getting people on board to get health. And then some of them actually end up kind of being like me over time, and that's all right. But if we can't get them to listen to us, and we can't get long-term compliance, and that's what everybody will tell you the problem is. How many people, I'm going to ask the audience a question, how many of you are advising other people about your health? Keep your hands up if you're having trouble talking to people and getting them to do it or staying on it. A lot of the hands stay up. Okay? So that's my point.
Well, I was just going to say that there's another side to that. First of all, we don't have really good evidence that giving a compromised version is necessarily more effective than a straight version. That's the first question. In other words, I understand what you're saying to get the message out in a broader way, but in terms of sustained success, what really helps people sustain their behavior is success. Now, it's true, many of our patients are what I call appropriately motivated. That means they're driven by pain, debility, and fear of death. So I have a rarefied audience of patients that are willing to do the extreme and radical versions of the kind of things that we advocate, an exclusively whole plant food diet that's SOS free. So we're carrying it even farther than just limiting it to plant foods. We're also getting rid of the chemicals added to food in the form of salt, oil, and sugar. But the reality
when
is
they won't do what he says, he cuts the food off completely.
But the people that are successful, because they were motivated by pain, debility, and death, you have an easier time getting compliance with those people. So if you're talking about trying to bring people in, I don't disagree with the concept. But for example, you don't tell alcoholics, just drink beer and wine, and you'll be right. And the reason is because we know that if you're drinking beer and wine, it leads to overconsumption in people that are vulnerable. Now, that doesn't mean everybody that drinks beer and wine is going to be a drunk. There are some people that can have a drink and not become a drunk. But if you're a drunk, it's not you.
That's right.
And some people can have a chunk of skunk or whatever it is and not become obese and develop health problems. But if you're overweight and you're having difficulty with a health problem, it may not be you. So for those individuals, a stricter program may be what's necessary to get the level of success they're satisfied with. If a person can do a modified version and be successful, that's great. And as you said, that you might be able to reach a much broader audience of people than what I would consider telling them the truth, which is that a health-promoting diet is a diet that eliminates these factors that are health-compromising, and acknowledging the fact that people can sometimes get away with certain things that makes it easier, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be eliminated in order for them to achieve the level of health that they're desirous for.
Well, your documentation for a lot of what I talk about in another area, which is the need for clinical judgment. And I think that basically none of us disagree with each other up here, really. And I send, just for the record, I know that Dr. Goldhamer teaches an SOS-free plant-based diet, and I've sent a lot of people to your place. You keep threatening to name a building after me, because the work they do is amazing. It's amazing, okay? But I think the common ground is that we have to exercise clinical judgment. So your example about alcohol is correct. I mean, alcoholics have terrible problems. They drive their cars into trees and mailboxes, and they lose their job, and they pee their pants and sleep in their car, and end up bankrupt and all that, okay? I had 9 glasses of wine in the last year. Having that discussion with me, it's like, I don't understand what you're talking about, okay? So I think if we insert some clinical judgment into the situation and take into consideration the individual audiences that we're all appealing to, because I, like you, when motivated people come in, they'll do anything. Nothing's too strict. My IBD diet is stricter than yours, because that's what you have to do to get an IBD patient. Well, they'll eat grass in the yard because they're sick of what they're doing right now, you know? So you have to look at people as individuals.
I think both of them are right. I really do. Pam comes from, uniquely, different than any of us sitting here, a higher end of the sales world. And they do a lot of deep profiling of psychology. And as you said, is it trendy or will this stick? And entire businesses depend upon this type of profiling now. So I think you're exactly right. If you can say to somebody, you make the first step, and I'll give you a story. When Whole Food opened in 1980 in Texas, they used to fly me in, and they had no room to have people lecture. So they pushed the vegetables and fruits back, and we put 100 people in and say, don't breathe, and we speak in the produce section in Austin. And they were all vegan, completely plant-based people, did it for the right reason. And years later, I would see them periodically, never got to know them well. They called me up and they said, we want you to fly in here to do a lecture, but we really want to spend 2 hours with you later. And I said, well, what do they want to talk to me about? And I got there and they said, we're intending bringing meat into the Whole Food. They thought I'd completely flip out and jump up and down and scream and beat them up and all of this stuff. And I said, well, make sure you put it in the very, very back of the store so everyone has to go through the vegetable department. They said, why would you ever say that? Don't you believe? Are you sneaking meat on the side? I said, no. I said, our generation, the hippie generation, a few of us, this is the way we went. And so it was a very small club, I have to tell you that. Michael probably belonged to that club, And But I couldn't get my mother into Whole Food Market. If it said health food in the front of it, she would have a heart attack if I tried to drag her in there. You didn't say health food. If you said pastry or meat, she'd say, okay, I'll come in. So do I think that we should be promoting meat? Now we go over to you. We choose to use the gold standard. I think that we both have a role here. Pam is doing exactly what I hope other people like Pam do, as well as Pam does. Congratulate her for doing that, bringing people in this direction. Now, if you want to go to Mecca, how many of you know that story? Once you've been to Mecca, don't tell me you haven't been to Mecca. Once you know the rules, don't tell me you should break the rules. You come to a place that we have here. We're going to clean you up, tell you the truth. We're going to give you religion. You're going to learn the 10 Commandments. And then it's up to you. Do you aspire to live at this level or not? And I'm not going to say everyone who's ever come to Hippocrates sticks to this. They don't. But 80% of our guests come back, and many times they say, well, I'm better this year than I was last year. I'm better this month than I was the next month. So whatever it takes, if we're moving in that direction, and I don't consider veganism trendy, we've done some real data and statistics. We're working with James Cameron on this point, and the people who own Virgin Air and all of this. The fact of the matter is, this is not a trend. This is the direction we're going in. Maybe we have to get everyone and do kumbaya and work together and love each other on this one.